I feel like as a man that's on self improvement, every guy that's I feel like lots of guys are on self improvement relatively, give or take. Actually, I wouldn't even be able to tell you that's not even a statistic I can even measure. Nonetheless, I feel like most guys want some level of status, right? That is something like, from the beginning of time, all men cared about was power, women, and money, right? And status, right? And, you get status from getting those three or whatever. And a key thing for a man to gain status is based off how valuable he is, right? And his value can be easily derived from how useful he is. And I was watching a video that was speaking about this from Alex Hormozy, right? He was talking about how if you as a man want to become a man of status, become a man who's useful, someone who can provide for society, someone who can just provide, because a man is tied, his value is tied to how much he can provide, whether that's money or protection or care or knowledge or whatever the case may be. It's just the way the world works, and it is what it is, right? Like, it's completely different for women. I feel like a woman's value is tied completely, not completely, but a majority of it to how attractive she is. A woman who's attractive at like a 19-year-old woman who's like a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 is as valuable as a man who was like 30 and has like a six-figure network and a six-figure income and all of that, right? Simply because of like, in terms of like what positions they would be in, right? Like in terms of like social media, we know how fast these like beautiful women can go all the way to the top, right? And they can make more and more money, or they can get treated like, they'll be put on yachts, they'll be treated with gifts, they'll have all the options of men to date and this and that, right? But for a man to get a valuable woman, for a man to go, very in a high position on social media or like get clouded or whatever the case may be, it would take years and years of work and skills and knowledge gathered, simply because it's just a different dynamic. And it is what it is. There's nothing we can do to really change that. And so the only thing you can do is, as a man, is to gather as much skills and knowledge as you can to become someone useful, right? And that, that can be like learning how to go to the gym, having a good physique is a good like a status symbol. Learning how to make money, being very smart, being good with like, even like something like being good with tools. Like, now you like being someone who's like able to work in construction, fix things, anything you can do essentially that can provide value to anybody else. Like, provide value meaning it's useful to someone else, and it's like something somebody would pay for, or a solution to someone's problem. If you can be the solution to someone's problem, you have that much more value. And the bigger the problem you can solve, the bigger the solution you are given, and that means the bigger amount of like usefulness you are. And it's so funny because I remember in high school, I had this friend, we had like group projects, but this was like a shop class, so we were like working on like aircraft parts, and like we were working on the engine. And I remember I would just watch, because I didn't really care for this stuff, so I would just watch over them, and they would do all the work, and he jokingly would be like, "Yo, you're so useless." That vocabulary has stuck with me since then, because I thought it was so funny. Like, I didn't even know about this whole like man being useful stuff and all that, but I started calling people useless for like, I still call people useless. I think it's such a funny like insult, but like, yo, you're actually useless. Like, someone who just sits around or does nothing. It's just like, it's so like such a basic insult, but it's so funny nonetheless. Now it's like coming back all full circle. Like, I was actually pretty useless. And like, if you find yourself in situations where you're just doing nothing, like everybody's cooking or cleaning, or everybody's like building something and working on a project or this and that, and you're just sitting around on your phone, or you're just watching a music video, or you're just doing you're reading a book, like maybe not reading a book, but you're essentially being useless in the context of the situation. And it really does not feel good to be useless. And you'd be like, oh, but I don't want to cook, that's a woman thing, I don't want to clean, that's not my job, I'm not a janitor. Like, you're still useless. Like you got to really get out of this whole mindset of like, oh, cooking's for women and cleaning's for janitors and this and that. It's like, if you aren't providing value to the circumstance that you're in, people will deem you as useless. Rather than, even if you were just cleaning, no one's gonna deem you as, oh, he's a janitor, he's a cleaner boy. It's like, no, at least you're doing something. You're doing something that helps everybody else around, especially if they're like family and friends. They're not gonna be like, oh yeah, he's a cleaner boy, he's a garbage man. Like, don't be fucking ridiculous. I feel like a lot of guys think like that. I thought like that for a long time too. Like, oh, I don't like. I would be so ridiculous and sometimes I wouldn't like help the woman out in like terms of like carrying something. I would be like, yeah, I know she could do it. I'm kind of tired. It's like, bro, just be a fucking gentleman. It's not even for like the whole dynamic of like, oh, you're a simp, you're a gentleman, you're trying to take care of. It's like, no, it's just being of use, just being like, I probably sound mad autistic, but it's like I used to do like such stupid shit, maybe because I was young, I was dumb, whatever. But I feel like a lot of guys think like that because they simply just don't want the perception of everybody else to be like skewed for how they view them. Like, oh, I don't want everybody to view me as a gender or like a gentleman who just really cares about what girls think about him and this and that. It's like I could kind of see that because I was like that, but you just need to become eventually someone who understands that your value as a man comes from what you provide, how useful you are, and the more you can provide, the more useful you can be, the better it is. The more value you gain, the more status you get, and the more status you get, typically things come with it, right? Like, you know, you get to a point where you're like, you gather enough skills and knowledge, you probably make more money than someone who just didn't have those skills and knowledge because you were able to become useful enough to get those skills, become useful enough to not get useful enough to get the knowledge, and then become more useful by applying that knowledge and getting the skill and getting better and better at it, and maybe start charging for it or whatever. And then, you know, that money means, you know, maybe more women or more power because you're in a power position, maybe become a CEO of a company, and then with that power comes, you know, status because now other people are recognizing you for what you're able to do and what you're able to provide and how much money you have and how much women you get and this and that. They're all interconnected, right? And I feel like a lot of people complain like, oh, like why is it so hard for a man to become useful and valuable? It taking like 5-10 years to gather like these very important skills of how like being able to like run a 6-figure, 7-figure business, or like getting a really nice physique, or becoming so smart that everybody respects my opinion and this and that. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like that's good because imagine like on the other end, like you being a girl, imagine like the girls that are born ugly. Like, you know, we all know like if you're born an attractive woman, like yes, you can go skyrocket to the top of the world or whatever, but being born beautiful is actually, I don't want to say it's hard, but it's so lucky, right? We have their chance of like high levels of success come strictly based off luck. If they're born ugly, they get pimples or this and that, whatever, they're fat because they ate too much. Right now, there's suddenly very low chance of them becoming a high level woman or whatever, right? But for a man, there's not that much luck involved. It's whether or not you're willing to put in the work. Are you willing to learn? Are you willing to try and do this and that? And it's like for women, they can have a very good peak life where they're on yachts and meet, you know, top of the line men that want them, and they have all the friends in the world, and they can be skyrocketed on social media, and they can do this and that opportunity, whatever, from like 18 to like, I don't know, like 25, 27 at most. But then after that, their life kind of just, it's like diminishing and just keeps going down. Like their life peaks at 27, but a man's life, like maybe for like the first 25, 30 years, it's just slowly going, like not really moving, but they don't ever peak. Like after a man hits like 30, and that's only like, you know, you have a good job, you have a good network, you have the cars, the house, you have the looks, you have the physique, you have all of that. Your life can essentially like, your life essentially continues to go up. Like you essentially don't peak until like 65. So like we can have, as men, you can have like 30 good years after you're properly established and you like worked your ass off, and it's like worth it because you're like, oh, I did all this, I almost deserve this because of how much work and effort I put in. But women is just like, I'm not talking shit about women, by the way. It's like for all the women that are born ugly or just not attractive or this and that, I genuinely feel bad for it because I don't know what you would have to become a woman of like status through like, I don't even know. That's their problem if I'm being honest. But as a man, I think we have like the idea of us being able to grind our way to the top should be enticing rather than like, oh, that's so much work. I feel like if you're a man who's proactive and wants that level of status and power and wealth, it's almost like, I mean, I want that, right? And that idea of like the grind is very enticing to me. I've always loved grinding if it came to like being the best in school, being the best in video games, being the best in the gym, whatever. It's like, you don't need to be the number one in the world, but just to be in the top 1% or whatever, there's a definite grind, and you can be in the 1% with others, and then it gets even more competitive. But nonetheless, just getting into the 1%, being better than the 99%, that grind is enticing. And as a proactive man, I would assume people who watch these are also on their self-improvement, and they like the idea of grinding and working hard and effort and, you know, applying their energy and eventually getting things that are worthwhile. And that's why it takes so much longer for us to get to that point, because it's more worthwhile and it lasts longer. Nonetheless, as a man, we gotta work hard and it'll be worth it in the end.